Before I begin, just like to ask the Olam if we could please daven for the refuah shlema of Rabbi Yishaya Mordechai Ezra ben Rachel Dveira. That's Meir Rebbe Rishaya Bakst. He's one of the founders of the Har Nof community, and he ran a kollel here for the last 20-25 years, and he's now in critical condition, and they've added a name. Rabbi Konigsberg just informed me this morning that they just added a name, so it's Yishaya Mordechai Ezra. Yishaya Mordechai Ezra ben Rachel Dveira. Yishaya Mordechai Ezra ben Rachel Dveira for refuah shlema. The Kina Yud Aleph, was designated by Yirmiyahu Hanavi as the most crucial Kina that needs to be said. Actually, it is the only one that Yirmiyahu Hanavi said that we have to say is the Kina to mourn for the tragedy of Yeshua HaMelech. And if you stop and think for one moment, who was Yirmiyahu? Yirmiyahu was the one that saw everything. He saw every single tsar, and he wrote about it in his sefer. But when it comes to Kina, what we're supposed to cry for, we're supposed to cry for Yeshua HaMelech. Not only that, the Kina that we're about to read was written by no less than Rabbi Elazar Kalir. Rabbi Elazar Kalir, according to many Shitas, was a Tana. Some people say he was Elazar, the son of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And what he did, if you look carefully at what we're about to say, it's made out of 22 sections corresponding to the Aleph base. And each section begins with words from the fourth parak of Eicha. It's absolutely brilliant how it's written. So, for example, the word Eicha, Eli, Kainu Me'elav, is corresponding to the Eicha, how the beginning of the fourth parak, Eicha, Yoam Zahav, how the golden visage of Yeshua HaMelech has become dimmed. And the next one is B'nei Cham, Gam, Davak. Each one corresponds to the corresponding pasuk in the 22 psukim of chapter 4 of Eicha. The only problem is even though Rashi in Eicha tells us that this fourth parak corresponds to Yeshua Hanavi, except for the first parak, except for the first pasuk, the whole parak is talking in vivid detail about the tragedies that happened at the time of the Churban, specifically focusing on how the beauty of Klal Yisrael was brought to the lowest of the lowest. So when we speak about the Nashim Tzidkaniyos, Bishtus Yedeim, and the holy Neshei Yisrael, the holy women of Klal Yisrael, that they took their own children, something that you and I, if we can just close our eyes and picture something on a personal level, what that means to take your own child and to use your own child as food, the greatness of Klal Yisrael brought to the lowest of lowest. That's what the fourth parak of Eicha speaks about, and yet, Elazar Kalir and Rashi refers to it as well, that all of this corresponds to the tragedy of Yeshua HaMelech. Vaisais, you see from here that the oimek of the tragedy of all the beauty of Klal Yisrael reaching the lowest of the lowest has its roots, has its shrashim in what happened to Yeshua HaMelech. So Yeshua HaMelech was a phenomena. We're going to read in a few moments that from the time of, let me just quote, Leikam kamayu mimois Avigdar. No one was like him since the time of Avigdar. Avigdar is Moshe Rabbeinu. Since Moshe Rabbeinu, nobody unleashed a kiruv movement the way that he did. He came from the worst of the worst. His grandfather was Menashe, the great Rosh Menashe. His father was Ammon, who unleashed 22 years of evil on Klal Yisrael. And Yeshayahu becomes a melech at 8 years old. And in the 18th year of his malchus, at the age of 26, he starts this kiruv movement, and he is convinced that all of Klal Yisrael has become under his wing, under his Torah. All of Klal Yisrael is pure. And when Paro Necho says, I want to pass through your land, I just want to pass through your land, I don't want to start up with you people, I just want to pass through your land. So Yeshayahu HaMelech recalled the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, Cherev lisavra ba'artzachem, Zok the Gemara in Tanis, Afilu Cherev shel Shalom. You cannot pass through my land, even if you come in peace, because we are now in a matzav of shleimus. Unfortunately, Yeshayahu's Taos, he could not have been more incorrect. The world was filled with frumkeit and Torah and yeshivas and all the beautiful things that Reb Hadar just described to us that we have today. Everything was in perfect place. They had mikvahs and they had batei dinim and everything was perfect. And they had ktaisis being printed. Everything was perfect during that dar. And yet, we're going to read in a few moments about the Litzanei Hadar and what they used to do, the Litzanim, or the fakers. And they pervaded throughout the land. And they made out that they were from, and they had every single thing externally that was from. When you came into their house, you saw a perfectly beautiful house. But when you opened the doors, you didn't realize that behind the doors was the Avodah Zarah. You wouldn't see it until the doors were closed, until the inspectors were out. This was the proverbial TV behind the Shas before the Churban Bayis Rishon. So Klal Yisrael looked perfect. Klal Yisrael looked that they were tzaddikim and everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be. But if you just open the doors and see what's going on behind the mezuzahs, you'll see the whole thing is fake. A melech is the essence of the people. And the melech, Yeshayahu, and again, we're talking on his level, someone with his greatness, with all the greatness that he had, on a certain level, he did not live in the world of reality. He lived in the world of Dimyon. He imagined his people were what they were not. And indeed, it was a reflection of the fake nature of Klal Yisrael at his time, expressed itself in his own inability to realize what was happening in his own realm. I want to share with you an idea that I heard from Meir Rebbe, Moshe Shapiro Tzadik Zichron Livracha. It's an idea that we should think about every day of the year, but especially on Tisha B'av. So in Hadar, we all learned that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he asked the advice of the Malachim. We all learned this. We all know how it went back and forth. Tzedek Ama Yibara She'oisit Tzedakos, Chesed Ama Yibara She'geimel Chasadim. Chesed says you should create because he does acts of kindness. Emes Ama Al Yibara She'kulei Shkarim. And Emes says, truth says, do not create him because he's filled with lies. Tzedek Ama Yibara She'oisit Tzedakos. Tzedek says, righteousness, create him because he will do acts of tzedakah, acts of charity. Shalom Ama Al Yibara She'kulei Ktata. And Shalom says, peace says, do not create him because he is filled with arguments. It's just for the record, the Maharal explains that chesed and tzedakah, kindness and charity, even a little bit, is considered an act of kindness. 1 penny that you give to charity is charity. But when it comes to emes, and when it comes to shalom, when it comes to truth, and when it comes to peace, so even a teeny weeny bit of sheker and a teeny weeny bit of anti-shalom, so the whole thing falls apart. You have nothing. So what does Hashem do? This is what we all learned. We learned this in kindergarten. We learned that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took emes and threw it to the ground. Hishlich emes arza. The joke goes, it landed in Kotsk. But if we stop and we read this medrash Bereshis Rabbah, we stop and read this and we stop over here. It makes no sense. So what did Hashem do? Hashem says, okay, there's a tie over here. It's 2 against 2. 2 says create, 2 says it's not create. Let's change the balance and let's get rid of one of them. Very much like the Soviet Union. This is the way we deal with our enemies. We don't like what they do, we get rid of them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, let's get rid of Emes and throw him to the ground. Why did he choose Emes? Let him choose Shalom and throw him to the ground. That would have been equally powerful. Says Rav Moshe, and this whole thing is really based on the Maral in the Sifa Emes. Rav Moshe Shapiro explains, you cannot possibly understand what we just said without reading the next line of the Medrash. The next line of the Medrash is the key to understanding everything that just happened. The Medrash continues and says that the angels came to Hashem and complained and said, why did you take your beautiful adornment, which is Emes? Emes is the clothing of Hashem. Hashem, you are complete and total truth. Why did you take your beautiful adornment and trash it? And then the pasuk, the Medrash brings down the pasuk. HaKadosh Baruch Hu responded with the pasuk, and I quote, Emes mi'eretz titzmach. Emes will go into the ground and will rot and reveal itself like a seed reveals itself and come out in the future as a beautiful tree. Which means Hashem did not throw Emes to the ground. HaKadosh Baruch Hu planted Emes into the ground. And there will come a time when that seed will reappear above the ground as a beautiful tree. One little seed can produce an infinity of apples. And that's going to be when Mashiach comes. And the whole emes of this world will be revealed. Every small, tiny little sheka will be turned around and turned to emes. My Rebbe used to say that we're having certain glimpses of what could be in the future. How a small grain of sand which contains silicon, and in a computer it's enough information to contain the British Library just from one small grain of sand, or one small atom can be broken down, and there's enough energy to destroy a city, as we saw at the end of World War II. The emes of the Bria will reveal itself ba'achris hayamim, and the emes in Adam, the true koyach of what a person is, we only use a fraction of our brain. Imagine we could use the full koyach of what we have. The full koyach of Adam, the full koyach of the Bria will be revealed by the Melech HaMashiach. But on Tisha B'av, we have to focus on the moment before that Gilui. Because we are holding now, before Mashiach comes, at that moment when emes has been rotting in the ground to the point where there is nothing left to see. To the naked eye, when a seed rots, just before it reveals itself, there's nothing. And Rabbi Moshe would say, that's the door that we live in. We live in the world that's kulei sheker. And the Kleisenberger, in his last years, would always say, this time of the year, the 3 weeks, every yid has to work on the midah of emes to try and build the world of emes. Now, just thinking last night, we were not zeicher to make havdalah on a glass of wine. And the Ramban explains, the Ramban says, because wine is ashirus, is wealth, but the real wealth is in the mind. And on Tisha B'av, we have what's called the Churban Hadas, the destruction of the intellect, the destruction of being able to think. We fool ourselves that we think, but we live in a world that is filled with lies. And therefore we cannot make Havdalah, because Havdalah is the process of showing the differentiation between the emes of Shabbos and the sheker of the 6 days of the week, ben kodesh l'chol. We no longer have the ability to make that differentiation. And my Rebbe Revolver Zatzal said that when we cry, it's so hard to cry for the Beis HaMikdash, but at least we should try and cry for ourselves, that we're not zeicher, we cannot have that ability to cry for the Beis HaMikdash. We live so much in this world of imagination, so disconnected from the world of truth. At least we should cry for the fact that we cannot live in that world of truth. So Yirmiyahu Hanavi knew what he was doing, and Rabbi Elazar HaKalir knew what they were doing when they told us the root of the root of the root of all of Churban is when the great king, a tzaddik, a yashar, a tamim, was not in touch with the reality of his own malchus. On his level, there was a disconnection, and he lived in the world of Dimyon. And the idea of Akina, as Rabbi Margolin explained, is to mo'ir as to tshuva. It's so easy for us to identify sheker in the world around. I have over here Rabbi Olesker. He can take over from me and tell us how to see sheker in the newspapers on every single line. If you find emes, it's purely mikra. Anything that you find when you read, just by chance, every so often you'll find something that by mistake was truth. And that's true. And it's much deeper than that, because it's not just sheker in the classic term. Sheker means living in an imaginary world, where the world of movie actors, they become the reality of this world. Baruch Hashem, this is Har Nof, but if we step out of Har Nof, people may be aware that the whole planet stopped for 1 month to watch